Now that we know a little bit about APIs and the tools we can use in order to access those APIs, the next hurdle to talk about is working with JSON data. JSON, JavaScript Object Notation, sometimes pronounced JSON, is a common way to be able to transmit data from one computer to another and is one of the preferred methods for APIs to communicate in. So let's look at a JSON example. For this video, I'm going to be using an API for the number of astronauts in space. And for that, I'm going to browse on my computer to api.open-notify.org/astros.json. Show that here. That URL right there. Now, when I typed this into my Firefox browser, it went ahead and it made things look pretty for me. And if I zoom in here, we'll see, yeah, here's a bunch of people who are in space currently. And we can see their name and we can see which spacecraft they're in. Looks like everybody is currently, most everybody's currently in the ISS, but there are some people in another one that I'm not aware of. Total number is 10 people, and success meaning we did actually successfully access the API. Now, this is the pretty data. If I come up here, I can see the raw data, and that is the raw JSON data. This is, for the most part, confusing, yet simple at the same time. It is a bunch of key, in this case, people, values, pairs, values right there through the square bracket. So there are keys, in this case, people, and then there are values inside of that. Inside of people, there's another key, for instance, name, and then a value of Mark Van de Heij, a key called craft, and the craft name value of ISS. So it's a bunch of key value pairs, and it looks somewhat confusing, especially when you see it in this type of format. However, once it starts getting into pretty views, it starts looking a little bit easier for us to view. Well, let's look at finding this data through a couple of different ways. First off, let's try the command line. So CURL, and I'm just going to go ahead and paste in the address right there, opennotify.org/astros.json. By the way, there's lots of other APIs at opennotify.org. This is just one of them. When I run this, then it very quickly goes online, downloads the information, and then prints it out to the screen. That's great. Let's do the same thing through another tool here of Postman. Let me go ahead and right click and paste, and then we just paste the API right there. Now, there are no parameters. There's no options that we're specifying here. We're just simply saying, give me the name or names of all the astronauts in space. Click send. And then similar to what we saw with Firefox, yeah, it tries to give me a pretty preview or a pretty view. I can also say, show me to the raw data. There is a preview, visualize. Let's see. Even in the pretty format, I can say it's not actually JSON, it's XML, in which case it messes things up because it's not XML. But I could specify the different type of data that it is. Great. Hey, this is awesome. This is telling me all the people that are in space for right now. However, this is kind of a pain to have to come in here and specify, yeah, open up Postman, type the URL in, click send. Right now it tells me there's 10 people, but I want to see, are there 10 people still tomorrow? And so maybe I want to turn this into some sort of an automation. And this again is where Postman comes in extremely handy. Over on the right hand side, I can click the two brackets with the slash in it, and it shows me various code snippets. Again, I can choose whichever version I want. For instance, CURL looks exactly like what we had typed. HTTP request, a Java request, a Node.js, and more. Again, I'm a Python person, so I'm going to go to Python requests. Now, there is the Python HTTP client. There we go. Which looks a little bit differently and is probably a little bit more native. However, I personally have found that the requests method works extremely well and is extremely commonly used in the world today. All right, so let's go ahead and copy that. Right there, copy snippet, and go into Visual Studio Code. I'll create a new file here. We'll call this Get Astronauts. I'll just say Get Astros because I'm not quite sure I can spell astronauts. And then paste the code in right there. Great, pretty simple code. If I go ahead and run it, we'll see that it actually puts out in the not so pretty format. Well, at this point, I can start working on start looking into how to format JSON data with Python. So this is the new content here. Go ahead and close that down. What I want to do is I need to convert response into a data type that Python understands. What I'm going to do, first off, I'm going to comment out our print statement there. I don't really want it to print. I want it to just ignore that and continue on to the next line. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this, I'm going to create a new variable here called items, and that's going to be equal to response, response.json. And before I do that, I actually do need to import another module, import JSON. So this gives me the module or library for JSON data, which allows me to read and convert JSON data in my environment. At this point, let's do something pretty, and let's print items. Make sure I'm doing my things here. Yeah, let's just say print items. Now this will go ahead and it should print out all of the JSON data, but there we go. But it's actually printing it in a method or an option that Python knows how to work with. So what I can do is I can actually say, hey, let's loop through and let's just look for each person. And for that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a for loop. I'll comment that out because we don't really want it to print again. And I'm going to do a for loop, and let's just call it for person, for lack of a better name for a variable, in items, quote, people. So this is going to look through the JSON data and it's going to look for something called people. And inside of that, it's going to then assign the value to person. Okay. So for that, let's go ahead and let's do a print, and let's go ahead and print out the name of the person as well as the name of the craft. And I'm going to do some placements here. There's aboard the... All right, so I wanted to say this person is aboard this craft. And so after that, let's see, dot format, and I want to specify my person variable. and I want to specifically get the name of that person. So that will go into the 0 placement that was in my string there. And then this next one is going to be my person and my craft. Let's go ahead and see if that runs and returns the information we're looking for. And it does. Let's go ahead and let's run this again through the debugger just to see exactly what's happening. So I'm going to, right here on line number 9, I'm going to start the debugger, or set a breakpoint on line 9, and then start the debugger. And so we'll stop on 9 there. So it hasn't yet performed the request. And I can confirm that by hovering the mouse over the response button, over the response variable, and I see it is in fact blank. If I step into, it has now gone ahead and performed the response, or performed the HTTP GET off of the API. I hover over response and I see, yes, I now have a lot of data here. Okay. Let's go ahead and convert the response JSON data into items. And I can now hover over items and I can see, yes, I have in fact 10 items. It's called people. And inside of people, I have my various items. And I can see, my first object here is name of Mark Van de High on the craft of ISS. Same thing with number 1 and so on. So by converting this text that was reported by the API into a Python object, I'm now able to actually parse through it and individually address each one of those items. Great. So for person in item, so this is going to grab the first people, which was Mark Van de High, and store it into person. Let's check that out. Now, if I hover over person, I'll see the values that are inside of person, and I can see, yes, in fact, I have a name and a craft property for person. We're then going to print that out. Yep, this person's name is aboard the blank craft. Step over, step into, and I can see, yep, there we go. So it's done with that loop for the first person, and so now it's going to assign the next person to the person variable, and then print that out, and so on, and so on. Let that continue. So using similar formatting and similar looping tech options, we can start going through the various API data that's returned to us and report back the values that are associated with them.